representations, including in Beijing, in China, because we also work a lot with Asian clients. In our internal organization, we are divided into desks, into departments. Those departments are focused in their own expertise area. My department is immigration and real estate. Then we have departments for litigation, for corporate, for tax, for instance. And besides this, that we have specific desks according to the language of the lawyers, so they can assist the clients in their own language. We have Mandarin speakers, we have Chinese, African, we have the German desk, the Russian, the French, the Italian. So the clients can be assisted and accessorized in Portugal by lawyers that speak their own language. Most of them, they have even born in those countries. In terms of my department, immigration departments, we have 14 lawyers. Because we know immigration clients are a specific type of clients, we are available 7 days per week, 24 hours. We chat, WhatsApp, whatever. Bilingual assistants, as I mentioned. So far, we have more than 2,500 cases in the Golden Visa approved with success. Families that come from all the parts in the world. As I mentioned, we have 40 years of presence in the market. In terms of immigration, our department was born in 2012, so it's already very well established, and we can provide the client with a 360-degree advice. What this means that a client that comes for immigration purposes will for sure have then other needs, tax issues, corporate issues, civil issues, and at that point, the office is available and it's ready to provide that advice in all the legal areas that are needed. Now, starting on the immigration programs, that's why we are here. As I mentioned in the beginning, Portugal has different options, has a more flexible regime in immigration in Europe. Today, I will highlight the Golden Visa, the residency for retirees or passive income holders, which is the D7 visa, the residency for entrepreneurs, which is the D2 visa, the startup visa, as well as the tech visa program, and briefly speaking on other options that are also available. Starting on the Golden Visa. First of all, one highlight that is the Golden Visa, it's called Golden Visa for marketing purposes, but it's not a visa. It's a permit, it's a card. It's an independent card, it's not a stamp in the passport. It's a very similar card to an ID card. And what is the Golden Visa? The Golden Visa is a program specifically for migration investment, which means that by doing an investment in the Portuguese territory, the investor will be entitled to a residency permit. Will be entitled for him, but also for his family. The Portuguese legislation allows the investor to reunify the spouse, to reunify children, even if they have more than 18 years old, and also to reunify parents and parents-in-law. For Portugal, the familiar nucleus is very important, so our programs always allow this, the family reunification. As I mentioned, by doing that investment in Portugal, it is granted a residency permit. Those investments are established in the law. I will explain them. And what I also need to explain from the beginning is the Golden Visa, as well as the other immigration programs that I will mention, they are 5 years programs, which means that when the client comes, he always has a first card of 1 year that is renewed every 2 years after that. In the end of the 5th year, he can go to other routes that we call the permanent residency or the citizenship option. I will explain that also later. Coming back to the Golden Visa. Why is the Golden Visa the program that has the most consensus and is more chosen by the investors? Because it's the more flexible one. It's the only one that you can do coming to Portugal with your passport or with your Schengen visa and do it from Portugal instead of starting abroad in the Portuguese consulate. So you come to Portugal, you do the investment, you present your personal documents, and you are entitled to have a residency permit. Why is also flexible? Because it's the only program in Portugal that although it allows to live, to work, and to stay or study in Portugal permanently, does not demand that stay, which means that you can stay, you can live, you can work, you can study. But if you don't want nothing of that, you will have the card and you can keep the card by staying just 7 days per year in Portugal. So it just requires the presence of the investor and family members in Portugal for 7 days a year. And by spending those 7 days a year, in the end of the 5th year, it's still entitled to permanent residency, is still entitled to citizenship. Also important, this program can be done under personal name, me as Sarah making the investment, or through a sole shareholder company. So the investor will incorporate a company, being the only shareholder, and can also do that through the company. In terms of investment, I have here the main areas: financial investments, real estate investments, patronage, which is more like a donation, and the corporate area. But in specific, there are 8 options of investments. So in terms of financial, we can highlight the capital transfer, which is of 1 million. And that capital transfer can be just a simple deposit, or can be the acquisition of Portuguese company shares. But we also have for 350K, the investment in participation units of funds, Portuguese funds, that are focused in capitalization of companies. So it's investment funds or venture capital funds. Other option, also available for the Golden Visa, that does not require any kind of economic or financial investment, is the jobs creation. And in this case, we have a requirement of 10 jobs creation in Portugal, under the investor personal name as an entrepreneur, or through a company that the investor incorporates. Besides this, in terms of corporate investments, we have here also the 1 million by acquiring shares of a Portuguese company, or the incorporation or reinforcement of share capital of a Portuguese company in the amount of 350K, plus the creation or the maintenance of 5 jobs positions. So in this option, we combine capital with jobs creation. Besides this, we have the real estate route, which is the one chosen for 80% of the investors so far. And under this route, we have 2 options. Any kind of real estate for 500,000. And in this case, it can be 1 real estate, 2 real estates, 3 real estates. How many real estates do you want until you achieve 500,000 investment in real estate? Can be a plot, can be a land, can be a vineyard, can be a hotel, an apartment, a shop, a restaurant, okay? Besides this, we have a different option under the real estate. We have the option of the old real estate, which means that under this option, which value is not the 500,000, it's 350, the investor buys the real estate and compromises to do refurbishing works. So this option aims to rehabilitate old buildings. And for that, here we have a requirement regarding the real estate. Those real estates, they need to be or more than 30 years old, or regardless the age, they need to be located in a specific area of Portugal, of each city, which we call rehabilitation area. If we look into Lisbon city, for instance, it will be almost the city. Most part of the city is considered rehabilitation area, except more recent areas that were already rehabilitated, like the Parque das Nações zone, which was rehabilitated in '98. So besides that, all the city is considered rehabilitation area, and any real estate there is qualified for this purpose. Besides this, we have other option for 250 that regards to activities, investment in activities for artistic output, reconstruction or maintenance of the national heritage. Most of the investors, they don't like this option because it's more like a donation, so they don't have anything back besides the visa, but it's also an option to be considered. And finally, we have the investments in research activities, for scientific or technological areas for 350. Those are the current options of investment available, each of them leading to the Golden Visa cards, each of them allowing family reunification, each of them just demanding to keep such investment during the 5 years, keeping a presence in Portugal of 7 days a year, and in the end of the 5th year, the possibility to apply for the permanent residency and the citizenship. Here, I do a summary of the most common options. As I mentioned, the investors have a preference for real estate, but also for the capital transfer and also for the acquisition of participation units, especially now with all the restrictions in traveling, in the circulation of people in the world. We notice an increase of interest in Portugal, also because of what is happening with other programs, but also because Portugal offers routes that they can start from abroad, they start online. And for instance, the financial or the acquisition of funds, the client does not need. It's a financial option. The client being in Portugal or being out of Portugal, the information will be the same. He will have the contact with the same exact entities to make his decision and to learn about the options. It's different from acquiring a real estate. But here I do a summary of the 4 options that have the consensus between the investors so far. So under the capital transfer, as I mentioned, we have a requirement of 1 million investment, which can be a simple deposit. The money is in the bank account and nothing happens, or can also be for the acquisition of public debt of Portugal. In particular, debt securities, savings certificates or treasury certificates, or also for the purchase of shares, as I mentioned, of a Portuguese private or public company. In terms of the 350K in an investment fund or venture capital funds, the only requirement here is the purpose of such funds. To be eligible for the Golden Visa, such funds, they need to be dedicated to the business capitalization. And here, business capitalization means to inject money in companies. Such companies, they can be Portuguese, but can also be foreign companies. Foreign companies can be up to 40% of the investments of such funds. 60% need to be located in Portugal. In terms of real estates, as I mentioned, any kind of real estate, 1, 2, or more, it is possible to use it to have some income by giving it to rent or for commercial or agricultural or touristic purposes, and it's also possible to buy it in co-ownership. So if I am an investor and I have a friend or I have a group of business partners and we find a building in Portugal or a hotel, each of us doing a 500,000 investment, we can purchase a real estate of 1, 2, 3 million in order to have golden visas for all of our families. And finally, the last option on the real estate, the 350 regarding all the real estates, as I mentioned, or they have more than 30 years old, or they are located in an urban rehabilitation area. In both cases, on the real estate option, 500,000 or 350, I can start the process without being already the owner of the real estate. I can start it with the promissory agreement, which in some cases it's good because I can have the visa while the building is under construction or while there are works going on, and taking advantage of being a cheaper investment because of that. Besides the golden visa, we have here what we call the residency for retired people or for holders of passive income. And why this is a good option? It's a good option because you don't have minimum amounts of investments. You just need to prove that you have passive income. And here what I need to explain. Except for the golden visa, which as I mentioned is the most flexible program that you can start in Portugal. These kind of programs that I will start now speaking about, they are a 2-steps program. They start in the Portuguese consulate and then they move to Portugal. So it's a 2 steps. First consulate, second step, Portugal before the immigration office. Here, what I need to do is to make the proof that the applicant has income that guarantees his economic subsistence in Portugal, or that the proof that the applicant is retired and that amount of pension is enough to live in Portugal. By passive income, we are speaking about pensions, we are speaking about dividends, and for instance, we are speaking about real estate rents in any country, provided that such money will be available for the daily life of the applicant here in Portugal. As I mentioned, it's a 2-step process, which means that starts in the consulate, making the proof of having that passive income, by granting a 4 months visa that allows a period for the client to make all the logistical to change his life to Portugal. In Portugal, there are a second step in this process where the client will have an interview and will be concluding his application before the immigration office by getting a residency permit. Also in this case, it's a residency permit valid for 1 year and then renewable every 2 years. And then in the end of the 5th year, with the right to access the permanent residency or the Portuguese citizenship. What I need to highlight is also that, different from the Golden Visa, which only requires 7 days of presence in Portuguese territory, all of these residencies, starting on this D7 option, the holder or the family member that holds a unified residency card, they are required to not be out of Portugal for more than 6 consecutive months during the card validity, or for more than 8 separated months during the card validity. Of course, there are exceptions, but what the applicants need to understand is Golden Visa, it's more flexible. The other options, the aim of such options is for people that are willing to live in Portugal, and that's why the law requires a minimum staying period superior, so at least of 6 months in Portugal. As I mentioned, there are exceptions, especially for professional activities, family reasons, social reasons, or health reasons. The residency for entrepreneurs, it's another route. It's what we call the D2 route. And basically here we have the same system. The process is filed in the Portuguese consulate, and we have to prove that we have a services agreement established with a Portuguese entity, or that we are willing to develop a business activity in Portugal, that we have a project and that we have already started that project by incorporating a Portuguese company and by developing and preparing the correspondent business plans. Same system, application in the consulate, 4 months visa granted. Second step in Portugal before the immigration office, where a residency permit card of 1 year is granted and then renewed every 2 years. Same requirements of presence with same exceptions for family, social, health, or business reasons. Startup, a different option. It's similar to the entrepreneurs option, but under the startup option, we can have one sole applicant or a group up to 5 applicants. And in this case, the big difference is that those applicants from third states who want to develop an innovative project in Portugal, under the startup visa, they will not do that alone. They will be received in Portugal by an incubator. They will have a contract with that incubator, and they will develop all their projects through that incubator system, which means that for this kind of application, the applicants or the group of applicants, they prepare their plan, they file that plan under what we call an online system, and the certified Portuguese entities that are qualified to be incubators, when they receive those available proposals of projects, they will analyze and they will check if any of such proposals is of interest. In case it is of interest, they will do the invitation to come to Portugal, and they will be responsible for being the incubator of this applicant or group of applicants. Same situation under the startup visa. The applicants are granted with 1-year card that is then renewed every 2 years. Same requirements of presence, same exceptions. Other option, also very similar to the entrepreneurs, which is the residency for high qualified professionals. And why is this different? Because here we have two options. Or the high qualified entrepreneurs, they come by themselves because they have a contract or a promise of contract in Portugal, or because they have an invitation under the tech visa. And the tech visa, it's not so much focus on the applicant, it's much focus on the Portuguese entities that want to hire not one, but more than one high qualified professionals. They can be high qualified professionals in any kind of area. Of course, technological is one of the areas of more needed in Portugal, but can be any kind of area. This high qualification is understood by an analysis of the income they will receive in Portugal, as well as on the academic qualifications and track records they can present. Same options, same requirements, same structure. Application abroad, permanent residency concluded in Portugal. Same requirements of staying and same exceptions allowed in the law for the applicants, especially used in this kind of applicants, because by being a high qualified professionals, it is very common that the Portuguese entities will ask them to go abroad and to fulfill other professional duties abroad of Portugal. All of these options of immigration that I mentioned, they are what we call residency immigration options for civil purposes. It's a right under different programs they have to live in Portugal. But together with these immigration options, we have a specific tax program. And I'm here making efforts and highlighting the concepts because this tax program has a very bad name. It's called non-habitual tax residency. And by saying non-habitual residence, people think it's an immigration program. That is not. It's a tech status that can be accumulated with any other immigration options that we mentioned. Golden visa, D7, D2, tech visa, or startup. And why is I'm mentioning here this option, although it's not immigration? I mentioned because it can be accumulated with the other immigration programs and will allow the applicants in Portugal to benefit from a special tax regime. And this tax regime, it will vary, the effect will vary according to the kind of income each applicant has, the country from such income comes, and the qualification of that income, as well as on the double taxation agreements that Portugal has with the different countries around the world. So what we have here is, for purpose of non-European applicants, they get a civil residency, golden visa, D7, D2, tech visa, or startup, for instance. And while here, they can apply for the NHR program, which is the tax program. This program, why its benefits? Because foreign income will, most of the cases, be exempted from taxation. If not exempted, will be subject to a low rate of taxation in Portugal. And even for the income received in Portugal, it will be applicable a flat rate, a very reduced flat rate of 20% on the qualified professional income obtained in Portugal, which is very good. It's, for instance, half of what I'm paying in Portugal as a Portuguese. So with the NHR, the applicant will be always better in terms of tax efficiency purposes. 5 years later, as I mentioned, all the immigration programs in Portugal, they consider 5 years. And why? Because the citizenship or the permanent residency It's only available after the 5th year of residency, of holding a residency card. So after the 5 years, which can be the golden visa, but can also be the D2, the D7, startup or entrepreneur visa, we can still continue to renew the cards. I can still continue the golden visa every 2 years. I can still continue the D2 for 2 years. I can still continue to renew the D7, or I can choose and go to the permanent residency, and at the same time for the Portuguese citizenship. And why can I choose or why can I avoid? Basically, the requirements for the permanent residency are not much more than the ones for the programs we see. But we have an additional requirement, which is the level of 2 of Portuguese language. It's not too much, it's European level A2, which means basic Portuguese, but is a requirement for and mandatory for the permanent residency. The Portuguese citizenship is also a possibility. After 5 years, as soon as I complete the 5 years, I can apply. And the requirement is also the Portuguese language level A2. Some applicants, they decide not to go because of the language requirements, so they can still continue to renew their current cards, or they decide not to go just because of their origin country does not allow to have more than 1 passport. That does not happen in Portugal. Portuguese citizens can have any kind of passports they want, 1, 2, or more. So from the part of the Portuguese perspective, there are no kind of denial of having more than 1 passport. And also important, different from what happens, for instance, in the United States, being a Portuguese citizenship does not mean automatically the duty to pay taxes in Portugal. Taxation in Portugal is different. It's not based on citizenship, it's based on residency in Portugal. The Portuguese passport is one of the most strongest passports in the world. Some years it's ranked in 3, some years it's ranked in 4 as most strongest, mostly because of the countries where we can enter when having a Portuguese passport without a need of a visa, but also because Portugal is part of European Union, and Portugal is part of a lot of agreements with Portuguese-speaking countries, but also with agreements with Latin America countries. So we have good relations with most of the biggest economies in the world. For the adults in Portugal, they can apply for the Portuguese passport with the 5 years of legal residency. As I mentioned, level A2 of Portuguese and clean criminal record, which is mandatory for any kind of immigrations. In terms of children, the children can apply after one of the parents get it, or they can also apply, for instance, if one of the parents already have a residency permit in Portugal for more than 2 years. If they are born in Portugal, they will be automatically entitled to the Portuguese citizenship. So it's important to have that in consideration and to make this planning in terms of immigration, in terms of succession, in terms of family. And finally, almost finishing to reply to some questions you may have. Why Portugal? What I can say from the start is only visiting you can feel what is Portugal. You can read, you can see some pictures, but it's not the same. Portugal is a very small country, but what people does not know is that we have a huge history by discovering a lot of countries in the world a lot of centuries ago, including, for instance, Goa, where we have a lot of Portuguese descendants. Besides this, in Portugal, you can find a safety environment. People can walk on the streets at night. Children can play in the streets. And that's why we are considered one of the safest countries in the world from the official ranking of World Peace Index, which is also good to be in consideration when choosing a second residency, a second passport, or a place to visit. Besides this, the access to the Portuguese passport, as I mentioned, The access to very well-ranked universities among the world. Portugal has 7 Portuguese universities ranked by the QS World University. Forbes, for instance, says that Portugal is the best country to live, to retire, or just to visit after COVID-19. And all of us are willing to be in this situation in the after COVID, because no one can stand the communications and all the news about COVID anymore. In Portugal, by having the residency card, so before citizenship, you are allowed to access the healthcare system, the social security, and you can benefit from the political stability we have in Europe, in the world. In Portugal, you can notice the freedom of expression, religious, sexual, and racial tolerance, which is also very good for the minorities, and the appreciation of female leadership. Besides this, it's qualified as the most welcoming European country in the world, which is significant because it's the first country having this for so many years in a row. It is also the top 10 at the cities to invest in real estate. Even during the COVID crisis, the real estate in Portugal is considered one of the most liquidity options of investment. And besides, by having a residency card, as I mentioned, you have access to other markets like the African market or the Brazilian market. And finally, Portugal is also ranked as an easy of doing business country, the next digital hub in Europe, which is very good for startups. And here you can have the privileged access to blue and green projects because of the ocean we have in almost of the country and the 300 of sunny days per year. How to maximize the investments in the end? By joining with your decision of immigration, with the tax incentives we have, with the reduced price on property per square meter when comparing to other countries in Europe, by benefit from the easy process of company incorporation. In 48 hours, you can have a Portuguese company, even if you don't have yet your residency card. The privileged access to renewable energy for projects, the access to Portuguese-speaking markets, and also the recent and innovative legal framework regarding technological-free zones for testing new products, and the digital innovation hubs with great connections to startups, to incubators, and to Portuguese universities. And that's what I have to share with you today. I hope it was a clear presentation.
Very nice, very nice.
Available for any questions.
Thank you. I think you can stop sharing the screen so then we can get the questions, or I'll start with few questions. Thank you, Sarah. As always, I know that you are very good at it, what you're doing. Very, very precise and everything. So I'm going to just asking everybody, if you have any questions, you can ask in Gujarati, Hindi, or English, and we can. I can ask on behalf of anybody. But also, I'm going to start with a couple of questions myself, and then all the attendees can also come up. Sarah, with respect to this Golden Visa program, how is the market doing right now from India, or what kind of interest do you see from India?
Well, the interest in the Portuguese program is growing. Especially it grows during the COVID-19 because of the good rankings Portugal had, still with the good response from the health system. But we can notice that as the time is passing and people is becoming more aware of this kind of programs, the interest is increasing. We had now recent news on the Cyprus and Malta programs, and Portugal.
Very bad news.
Yeah, very bad. And Portugal seems to be a safest option to consider. Yes. So we notice an increase of interest from India, but also from United States. From India, especially in the option of financial investments, 315 funds, but also on the startup option.
Okay. So as you mentioned about the startup fund or the startup, now how do we assist the Indian startup when we want to go about the like pitching the ideas? How do we help them? Like probably, you know, some many a times they might have an idea, they may not have an idea, and they need a lot of help. So as a law firm, as you are sitting in Portugal in Lisbon, like how do we help them, or what kind of services we can provide them?
So we can help them in two main ways. First of all, in the legal perspective, so organizing the application in order to comply with all the requirements. But this is what I would call a second step. The
Yes.
first step is for them to have a business plan and an innovative idea. And it's important to be an innovative idea in terms of the Portuguese markets, but also in terms of the potential to be a
European market.
International market.
Yeah.
So the main purpose of this program is to bring people so they can have here the conditions to develop something that will be of international interest.
Right. Right. And so how many government approved this incubation centers are there as of now in Portugal?
I do not have the concrete number, but I know there are a list of more than 15 pages of incubators that are eligible to receive this kind of program applicants.
So are these incubation centers like marketing themselves actively, or they are just waiting for the government to do the marketing? Like how?
There are two or three that they marketing themselves, especially through Ajmera. We can highlight Lisbon Startup. They are the biggest. But then there are smallest ones connected with universities that they are not promoting so much their situation outside, but they can bring the conditions to be good incubators. And by contacting any provider in Portugal, we can making the match between the offer and the demands.
Okay. Right. And when it comes to this renovations, yeah, you know, like you buy a properties or make an investment of 350, how do we assist our Indian clients when it comes to making an investment? Like, can we make an introduction to some kind of a developers or the real estate brokers in Portugal to identify the properties? How do we assist them?
So the properties in Portugal, different from what happens with EB5, we do not have a list of qualified properties.
Okay.
And that is the work of the lawyer to make the due diligence to see if it's a qualified investment.
Okay.
And if the documents fulfill the requirements of the law. So the main step will be to present to any kind of interest client the options available. After having the options, we can make here a delimitation of the area where the client wants to invest, if in the north, if in the center, or